Emerald here. I know I've been a little bit MIA lately. It's almost been 6 months since I've done a video. I've been pretty busy and lazy for the most part. I also just haven't had anything to make a video on. But I've been thinking a lot lately about my YouTube channel, and although I can't say I'll be better at uploading videos, I will say that I have some things coming. Whenever I get really in the mood to listen to some scary stories, I always get motivated to make my own content and just talk about the stuff that I love. As you could probably tell by this upload, I've decided to rename Horror Talk to The Haunted Hour. It just sounds better to me. Along with that, I have deleted my Horror Talk videos because I will be re-uploading them with the goal in mind to make them better. I do appreciate feedback as well as recommendations for videos I should do and things I should talk about. I originally planned on this series to be as if you and your friend were sitting on the couch playing scary games while talking about scary things. However, I personally feel that the way my last two Horror Talk videos were is a better type of video. Those are more structured and focused. I like it better at least. I enjoy a more structured video without distractions or interruptions in my speech. But you probably like a more casual way better, and I would understand that. So, if you have a preference on what type of scary content you would all like me to do, please leave your recommendations and feedback in the comments below. Also, I like putting video footage of me playing scary games on the screen while talking. I feel it adds something to go with the stories. If you prefer a still image or video instead of me playing games, also let me know, as I would love to hear feedback. With that being said, my name is the Emerald Dylan, and welcome to the Haunted Hour. Missing 411 is an occurrence in which a camper or hiker disappears randomly, seemingly without explanation, and is either never seen again or is found miles away from where they disappeared from. Some people that vanish turn up again and can't remember what happened, and some people are found deceased in a very disturbing and odd circumstance. In some cases, entire bodies were found, and in other cases only partial remains were found, and other cases result in total disappearance. Today we will be taking the 5 cases that I find the most interesting, baffling, and unexplainable. There are many missing 411 cases that have either been solved or have perfectly rational explanations for, even if we don't have all the evidence yet. And then there are cases that are truly mysterious. These 5, I believe, have very little to no explanation at all for what happened. Let's get into it. On the morning of July 18th, 2007, 51-year-old Barbara Bollock was hiking in the Bear Creek Overlook Trail near Victor, Montana with a family friend named Jim Romaker. Nearing the end of the trail, Jim had turned his attention away from Barbara and towards the beautiful scenic outlook in front of him. Only about 45 seconds passed, and Jim turned around and lost sight of Barbara. Despite looking all around for her, and even going all the way back down the trail, she had vanished without a trace. He had made it to the car and found that it was still there, indicating that Barbara had not made it to the vehicle. A search then commenced with an outcome of over 100 volunteers, helicopters, and search dogs. Although they had all those resources and a search that lasted for 2 weeks, Barbara Bollock was never found. No remains, no evidence, no answers. Of course there's suspicion on Jim. However, if he was responsible, he did an impressive job at hiding her body to where nothing was ever discovered. The other problem is that he took a polygraph test and passed. There was also no evidence of foul play or animal predation, so the only possible explanation is that she either fell somewhere or wandered off and was lost. This is an example of a missing persons case that had a chilling outcome, even though the story of how it happened was so short and simple. Until the day she is located, though, this case will remain one of the most haunting missing persons cases out there. Traveling now to the other side of the country in the Adirondack Mountains of New York, we follow the case of Tom Messick. At an impressive 82 years old, Tom was a veteran and had a passion for hunting and being in the wilderness. At the time of his disappearance, he was dealing with some health issues such as vision and hearing troubles, missing his right eye, back problems, heart problems, and was recovering from shingles on the day he disappeared. On November 15th, 2015, Tom and 5 other family members were hunting at Brant Lake near Horicon, New York, more specifically Lily Pond. The group were running a hunting formation called a driven hunt or a drive. The way it works is a few people are in a specific spot around wildlife to move around and make noise, scaring off any prey in the area towards the watchers. A few other hunters further away that are stationary and await the fleeing wildlife to then ambush them and kill them. Tom was one of the watchers in the group. He had a rifle and a radio with him at his post. One of the other watchers reported to hear a very brief but loud metallic snapping sound towards Tom's location. When the hunting trip was over, the group all had met back together at 4 p.m. Everyone except for Tom. They went looking for him and did whatever they could to alert Tom to their location, such as honking car horns and firing rifles in the air. Nothing ever came of that. Shortly after, a search party was organized. Eventually, the FBI got involved. Tom's wife asked one of the agents why they were there, and they simply, yet chillingly, responded with, "We just feel that something feels off about this case." This is strange because the FBI don't usually get involved with the missing hunter cases. The search lasted several weeks and was accompanied by more than 300 searchers, helicopters, and dog teams. Not a single trace or shred of evidence was ever found, not even his rifle or his radio. The only clue they ever had was the accounting of one of the watchers hearing that metallic snap sound coming from his direction. The most baffling fact about this is how he couldn't have gotten far on his own because of his age and disabilities. No sinkholes or steep drop-offs were ever discovered around him, making this case truly mysterious. To this day, Tom Messick remains missing without clues or evidence. Mount Shasta is famously known for its paranormal activity and missing persons cases. The most intriguing one here is that of Carl Landers. On May 22, 1999, 69-year-old Carl Landers, as well as his two close friends Milton Gaines and Barry Gilmore, were hiking Mount Shasta in Northern California. Their goal was to summit Mount Shasta together. He had plenty of hiking experience throughout his life, but on this trip he was suffering from altitude sickness. Although he did have medication for this, it proved ineffective because of the side effects. Because of this, he was moving rather sluggish on the whole hike. In the morning of his disappearance, Carl decided to head to the next base camp, Lake Helen, while Milton and Barry packed up the camp. They agreed that Carl would hike to Lake Helen, and the two would meet him there. Then they would summit together because that base camp was the last one before reaching the Avalanche Gulch route, which would take them to the top of the mountain. Upon arrival at Lake Helen, Milton and Barry discovered that Carl was not there. They asked a ranger if they saw a man of Carl's description pass by, and he said that he had. This ranger would be the last person to ever see Carl. There were two separate trails, one that was easier with a fair amount of people, and another trail that was steeper and more rugged. This ranger said he saw Carl go up the harder trail with no people hiking it. Milton and Barry hiked the trail hoping to find Carl, but there was no sign of him anywhere. Soon after, a search party was organized, but to no avail. The entire mountain was searched, witnesses that had seen Carl on the way up were questioned, and the search party lasted for 10 days with over 80 search personnel and a helicopter equipped with infrared spotting. Carl was never found. No body, belongings, or remains. The most bizarre thing about this is the area he disappeared from had no steep drop-offs or cliffs, crevices, or caves. There was simply nowhere for his body to be hidden if he slipped and fell. So the biggest question here is if he had simply slipped and fell, where did his body go? And where could any of his belongings have gone to? This is one of those cases where despite everything we know, we just do not have a good answer. The case of Carl Landers is one of the most bizarre and mysterious missing person cases out there. Moving north about 500 miles to Mount Rainier, Eric Lewis and two of his friends named Don Storm Jr. and Trevor Lane were attempting to climb Mount Rainier on July 1st, 2010. Despite it being in the summer, the mountain was still packed white with snow. They were climbing together via rope, with all three of them tethered together. Eric Lewis was the last in line on this rope. Nearing the summit, they had stopped to rest and waited for everyone to regroup. While Don and Trevor were resting and waiting for Eric, they noticed Eric was taking a long time. That's when they tugged on the rope and instantly knew something was wrong. They pulled it all the way up to them and found that Eric had unclipped himself. This is something you are never supposed to do unless there's imminent danger or some other type of emergency is happening. They had started climbing down to try to find Eric and made a shocking discovery. They tracked Eric's footprints and found that they had stopped suddenly. No variation, no markings in the snow of tumbling down the mountain, only footprints that were moving forward, then dead stopping. It's almost as if something had plucked him from the mountain. So their next thought was maybe he had somehow summited. So they kept climbing till they reached the top. no Eric. Then they made their way down to alert the Rangers and organize a search team. The only discovery and clue that was ever found was several hundred feet below where he had disappeared from, was a small ice cave with Eric's gear at the cave mouth. Again, no Eric. This was the only thing ever discovered, as Eric Lewis was never found or recovered. While it is possible that he could have fallen or was forced to rest and got disoriented with his tracks being distorted by the wind, it doesn't quite explain how he would have gotten down the mountain safely or how he would have made it to the ice cave, left all his gear at the cave mouth, then vanished without a trace. Along with Mount Shasta, Mount Rainier is another mountain and foresty area that is notorious for its strange disappearances. The biggest question lingering with the Eric Lewis case is why in the world did Eric unclip himself? Was this a case of fear, paranoia, disorientation, or something supernatural? Now for number 1. The case that I believe is truly the most unexplainable, the most bizarre, and the most unnerving. The one missing 411 case that defines the entire phenomenon for me is Garrett Bardsley. I have been trying to come up with an explanation for this one ever since I first heard it, and I just can't. Nothing I've ever thought of for this makes perfect sense. The story begins with a Boy Scout troop campout around the Kuberant Lake in the Uintah Mountains of Utah. 12-year-old Garrett Bardsley and his father, Kevin, awoke at 8 a.m. on the morning of Friday, August 20th, 2004, to go fishing at a nearby lake. On the way to the pond, Garrett had stepped in some water and got his socks wet. Initially, he didn't mind, but when arriving to the lake to start fishing, he had changed his mind. His father, Kevin, had allowed him to go back to the campsite to change socks. On his way back, he had made a wrong turn and was not using the correct path. Observing this, Kevin had intervened and had yelled at him to go back and take the correct path, which he had shown him. Kevin had watched his son moving on the correct path towards the campsite until he was out of view, then had proceeded to fish. About 20 minutes later, Kevin had realized that Garrett was not back to the lake. Growing concerned, he rushed back to the campsite to question the other Boy Scouts and the leaders about if they had seen Garrett. Nobody had. Panic immediately set in, and the whole scout troop had begun searching for Garrett. By nightfall, a search team was organized. Massive fires were lit in the hopes that Garrett would see the light and move towards them. Helicopters were circling the area with spotlights, hoping the light would also attract Garrett. That weekend, there were more than 200 volunteers searching for him. Despite a massive search that spanned 9 days with volunteers searching until October, Garrett was never found. The only thing discovered that could possibly be Garrett's is a wet Nike sock. His mother had claimed that that sock was Garrett's, while a searcher eventually did come forward and claimed that the sock may have been his, so it's not clear whether or not that was Garrett's. Now let's get into the weird stuff. On his way back to the campsite, Garrett was holding his fishing rod. That fishing rod has never been recovered or even seen. On that morning, Garrett was wearing a black hoodie, reversible black and red sweatpants, and white Converse tennis shoes. This is a very bright color combination that should have been very easy to spot. The area they were camping in was a huge boulder field in a giant bowl. Garrett should not have gotten far at all. Why wouldn't he have seen the lights from the bonfires and the helicopter spotlight? If he wandered off and was lost, how did he get outside of the bowl area they were in? Shouldn't he have recognized he was in the complete wrong area? If he had found some sort of shelter somewhere, wouldn't he still be able to be found? There are many factors and questions in this case that simply do not make sense. There were no signs of an animal attack, because if there were, there would be signs of a struggle, and he would have dropped his fishing rod. There could have been blood, remains, or torn clothing. Also, he didn't make any noise at all. If he was being attacked, wouldn't he scream? There were also no visible tracks, so finding out what direction he could have gone wasn't possible. It's as if Garrett had simply vanished into thin air. The only things that could maybe make sense are if he fell into some cave or crevice somewhere that somehow nobody has ever found, or maybe he did make it to a highway and was picked up by someone. However, there simply is just not enough evidence or clues as to what actually happened to Garrett Bardsley. As I said, I believe this missing 411 case is the most bizarre, strange, mysterious, scary, and interesting case out there. The thing that fascinates me about missing 411 are the conclusions. You have these people that either vanish completely with no trace or remains ever found, cases where people are found miles away from where they vanished from in such a short amount of time, cases where missing people should absolutely be found but aren't, and cases where all laws of reality are completely defied seemingly without explanation. I don't necessarily have ideas as to why these missing person cases happen, but I will say that they are weird. Most missing persons cases are simple. People just wander off the trails, make stupid decisions, or fall down somewhere. But those cases are all explainable and we figure out what happened. However, these 5 cases that we've covered today don't have simple explanations. They are still unsolved mysteries. Sure, we may have some facts and evidences with these cases, but not enough to piece together the whole puzzle. What do you think happened in each of these cases? Are all these perfectly rational and explainable even with missing clues and evidence? Or is something paranormal or supernatural responsible?